Hello everyone, welcome to Grant Thornton's panel discussion on business outlook amidst COVID-19 or coronavirus and what lies beyond that. Our focus will be on US and India trade and how and where the business opportunities lie for Indian businesses as well as the US businesses. Ambassador Verma has rich experience on US and India policy matters as well as on bilateral trade relations. Sir, it's indeed our privilege to have you as part of the panel, and thank you once again for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be with you. I'm excited for our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Along with Ambassador Verma, we also have Siddharth Nigam, who is my colleague and the National Managing Partner, Clients and Markets for Grant Thornton in India, and leads the US-India corridor for our firm. While there are different predictions and theories and reports coming our way in terms of the financial cost and impact of COVID-19, one of the recent reports by ADB suggests that the financial cost of this epidemic or pandemic could be as high as about $4 trillion, which is almost 5% of the global GDP. Now, if you count in numbers, it's a huge, huge impact. So one thing is for certain amongst all this uncertainty, which is that most of the economies are likely to be adversely impacted, which in turn will adversely impact the various businesses. And that's exactly the topic of our discussion with focus on US and India. Many countries across the globe, including US, UK, Singapore, Australia, India, Germany, and others, have taken various measures in this confusion and chaos to provide support to the economy at large, businesses in particular, and individuals, especially at the bottom of the pyramid. Now, coming to US specifically, Ambassador Verma, recently the government announced a huge, huge package of about $2 trillion, which is roughly about 10% of the annual US GDP. And to my knowledge, it is one of the highest ever packages announced in one go. What's your view in terms of the recent US $2 trillion package, how sufficient it is in terms of the businesses and whether it will support in order to maintain stability and necessary support and the fiscal stimulus to the economy? Sir, your views on that?
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's an important question, and it's one we're all wondering, actually. I think you had it right. This is an unprecedented move by the US government. We've never had a $2 trillion stimulus package before. And so there are several things I should just mention, though, about the last couple of months before we even get to the stimulus package, because you know, there are some really important lessons that I think we have to learn as we go forward. First, you know, like India, the US is a federal system, and we've had a fairly decentralized approach, which I think has surprised people. So you have 50 governors essentially doing and orchestrating 50 different plans, very loose set of national standards. And so there have been challenges on distribution of supplies, on protocols to follow if you're an individual. And I think that has been difficult, I think, a difficult experience for us. Whereas I think, and I welcome your views on this, India has taken a much more top-down approach, a much more centralized approach. So I think that's important. I think that's something we have to learn from. But on the positive side, you know, our Congress doesn't come together very often for big bipartisan measures. But this recent $2 trillion bill is actually the third measure in just the last 30 days that has actually gone through the Congress. So we call this our phase 3. The first phase was focused on testing. The second phase was really focused on frontline workers. And this third phase has gotten several parts to it. Focus on individuals, small businesses, corporations, the health sector, local and state governments, and then an incredible plus up for the federal government at large. And we can get into each of those as the discussion continues. But ultimately, you know, your question about whether this is sufficient, I'll just quote, you know, Dr. Fauci, who's become the face of the administration on the health side. This is a health crisis. This is not an economic crisis. This is a pandemic that has incredible personal costs and suffering that obviously has economic consequences tied to that. But if we don't solve the health component of this, the economic problems will continue. And so I think that's why we've had this kind of two paths approach, solving the health crisis, which will have an impact on the economic return and economic vitality. And I think the jury is still out on whether we're doing what we need to do to solve the health component of it. And again, we can go into details on what's in the bill, but I just wanted to lay out those broad thoughts about how we're approaching. I guess the final thing, I don't want to leave this off. I've been mystified, and really it's been staggering to see the lack of international cooperation, just the absence of international cooperation, and each country deciding who gets let in and who doesn't get let in, what kind of export control or import control restrictions they'll have. And so I think we've really seen just a failure in the G20, the G7, the international institutions that used to function so strongly at a time of crisis. And again, this is unprecedented, but I think we're all suffering from the lack of a global framework. I'll stop there for now.
2008 global financial crisis, we saw immediate meetings and brainstorming amongst the top countries, especially the G20 and G7 or 6. However, this time, I think it's more individual efforts and it's more protectionist policies which we are seeing. Why do you think it is happening like this?
I guess I'd come up with maybe 2 or 3 reasons. The first, I think we're seeing a bit of decline in U.S. interest and U.S. leadership in the global institutions. And this didn't just occur, you know, in the last year. This has been, I think, what I call a gravitational pull of the American voter and American taxpayer, pulling kind of the U.S. back into the 4 corners of its borders. And so this is what the world looks like when there is a greater struggle for power and a greater number of players at the table all competing, and a lack of a kind of dominant player to set the agenda or to drive change. I think that's the first thing. The second thing I would say about this particular pandemic is that it creates suspicion. It creates suspicion about foreign people. It creates suspicion about foreign trade. It creates suspicion and doubt about international linkages. And so it plays into the fears of globalization and of a globalized world. And I think, you know, look, I think we have to also be able to think of the days beyond this crisis and how important an international globalized response and economic cooperation and trade and free movement of people with sufficient rules and protocols. But that's going to be critical to our recovery in the United States. It'll be critical to India's recovery, Europe's recovery. And I think we have to be really careful about losing all the great kind of international cooperation, commercial, diplomatic, military, humanitarian, that we've essentially gotten used to since the end of World War II.
Let me change tracks, Sid, and come to you in terms of the Indian context. Unlike the US government, where we saw a mega relief package being announced, I think India has adopted a stand to announce focused intervention and over a series of measures to be taken over a period of time rather than going for a big bang approach. What's your view in terms of what you're hearing and your own independent evaluation in terms of recent announcements? And does the Indian businesses expect something more to come as we go ahead?
Thanks, Vikas. I think just taking a cue from Ambassador Verma, I think the Indian government, similar to what's happening in Singapore, that addressing the crisis one step at a time. I think the initial package is around benefiting the masses, making sure the poor have enough to eat, the wage earners and farmers are protected. It is actually trying to deal with a healthcare crisis and not looking at this as an economic crisis, which has been the approach of the larger economies, whether it's US, Germany, UK, or Australia, where the focus has been on economic revival as part of the package. I think if I look at it, in a very positive standpoint, it is the largest scheme ever in the history of mankind, which is expected to benefit 800 million people. It is about putting food in their mouths for the next 1 month. They seem like small numbers, but putting in $30 into each farmer's account in the month of April, increasing the minimum wage under the program called Manrega by almost 10%, asking the states to allocate $4 billion to construction workers. These are really immigrant daily wage earners, putting $15 in the accounts of senior citizens, widows, and disabled, pre-cooking gas, 3 months, for 3 months, and food. I think this is really approaching what I call the grassroots, the baseline, making sure the country as a whole comes together and we deal with this crisis. I think the business end, because just to, maybe repeating what you said, it's been a little, I think businesses and entrepreneurs are still expecting more. Government has put in measures to improve liquidity. They have, allowed moratorium on repayments and interest on term loans. There is relaxation on compliance around filings, board meetings, on tax compliance. I think there's also been, it's been a one line, but, big relief on the insolvency law, which is a big bang reform that India put in place about 3 years ago, which helped us move up the ease of doing business rankings. I think they're increasing the limit for default by 100-fold, plus other reliefs that are being given, I think is quite key. It does not impact larger India Inc., but people who are under tremendous stress, businesses which are under tremendous stress will benefit out of that. I think also in terms of, there has been a reduction in the repo rate, interest rates coming down, and there is no penalty on delayed payments. Government has also agreed to help the wage earners and the businesses at the same time by paying their superannuation contributions for a period of 3 months. I think also, thinking about the frontline workers, and I think it is a great move by the government to provide insurance coverage of about $80,000, which is significant in the Indian context. So I believe that it is still a populist model, but it is about dealing with the healthcare crisis. And business does want more, and we'll cover that later in the discussion.
Coming back to you, Ambassador Verma, what is the view which businesses are taking in terms of the present situation in the US and how they are gearing up post 1 quarter or 2 quarters in terms of the business activity in the US?
Yeah, I think that's an important question because the economic outlook is difficult. There's no question about it. As we think about just the first quarter, which ended at the end of March, the stock market posted its largest first quarter loss ever in the history of the stock market. The Dow Jones Industrial is down about 23%. The S&P 500 is down 20%. That's just on the equities market. On unemployment claims, again, unprecedented numbers of people filing for unemployment. So we keep these records weekly. They release the job claims numbers each week. At the end of the first week, it was 2.3 million people had filed claims, an additional 6.5 million people last week. Again, the highest number before that was just a fraction of those numbers, maybe 600, 700,000 at the height of the financial crisis. So the jobs numbers are not looking good. And that number is expected to climb dramatically as restaurants and retail and other service sector employment continues to really suffer. we've had incredible supply chain disruptions. And I think this has to be an important part of our conversation here today, because this is an area where I think the US and India really need to have detailed, important conversations on supply. Supply for pharmaceuticals, industry, supply, medical device side, ultimately to serve the populations of our countries and other countries, because we've become incredibly reliant on each other, which is good, but we want to make sure the continued flow of those goods continues. And as we look ahead, look, some economists are reporting that our gross domestic product just in the second quarter could contract another 30%. Another 30% just in the second quarter. Now, this would be dramatic and unprecedented, but those same economists are saying that the economy is fundamentally sound, so that when we do get out of the health side of this, the third quarter recovery should be strong and should be rapid. I think the open question in that forecast is, do we get the health crisis under control? There are some, the Surgeon General said this is going to be one of the worst weeks we've ever had as a nation. There are some positive signs, like in states that have been greatly affected, New York, for example, that maybe we're reaching the top of that curve. We don't know. We'll have to keep an eye on it. So can we get our arms around the health crisis? And secondly, what will be the damage in these first two quarters to small and medium-sized businesses, for example? Can they just turn the lights back on in the third quarter? Does it just return back to normal? And unfortunately, I think a lot of businesses are not going to make it through these first two quarters. A lot of institutions will not make it through these first two quarters. That's why the government aspects of this and the support are so important, to try to get people and get businesses to that third quarter. So I think we're quite pessimistic about the second quarter, and cautiously optimistic about the second half of the year, with a lot of caveats in that prediction.
Grant Thornton and FICCI have been conducting a survey vis-a-vis Indian businesses in terms of the challenges that they are facing and what their suggestions or asks are from the government and the regulators. In that context, initial inputs have come in. I think some of the points are very relevant. Some suggestions are also very welcome suggestions. So based on these inputs and your own interaction with Indian businesses and key stakeholders, what are the key challenges from Indian businesses perspective, as well as what is their key ask from the government right now?
So Vikas, Grant Thornton with FICCI, which is an apex industries chamber, we conducted a survey focused on Indian businesses and Indian business owners. And I think the feedback that came from those business owners, they credited the government of taking decisive action on dealing with the healthcare crisis through the lockdown and taking care of the poor. But a lot of businesses felt that government needs to support them over and beyond the liquidity and compliance efforts or benefits that have been given. Just in terms of a couple of highlights from that survey, in the short term, and this is really for the next quarter or two, they would like support on their cash flow, maybe more drawing power against the existing limits, about 15% without additional collateral. They have also requested for no coercive action due to delay in compliance given the circumstances. They would request the government to make the refunds due from them quick, within 30 days, again, focusing on liquidity and cash flow. Also including force majeure as a default clause in all contracts, whether it's written or not, and extend, if possible, the financial year by a quarter to 30th of June. Actually, we were pleasantly surprised that the business houses have all come back asking for short-term help as opposed to big ticket, and it is for the government to look into this to help businesses and business owners, especially in the mid-market businesses which are fueling the growth, driving the consumption, get back on their feet quickly.
Sid, I think you raised very valid points that Indian businesses continue to be optimistic about the long-term future of the country. That clearly shows in terms of their ask for short-term support. And I think they would not be wrong in asking for this support at this stage, keeping in with the state of the affairs. I'll come back to you for details on this point later on. Ambassador Verma, I am reminded of a popular quote that never let a crisis go waste. So I'm looking at some silver lining amidst the dark clouds. Sir, is it the right time to push for and aim for a great bilateral trade agreement which supports both US and India, the two largest democracies in the world? Sir, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. I think we have to get through the crisis first, and then I think we can return to the trade discussions. I think that's why some of us were disappointed when President Trump came to India and left India without a trade agreement, because those are such action-forcing events to have the entire US administration and the Indian government focused on a visit with deliverables. That was the ideal time. And frankly, I think the problems were on the US side about how to get across the finish line. So I hope we can return to that. And you mentioned it's about $150 billion now, which is a good number. And as I tell people all the time, we shouldn't hold ourselves, we shouldn't be too tough on ourselves on that number. As we think about only 20 years ago, we had just $5, $6, or $7 billion in two-way trade. So these numbers have grown dramatically in the past 2 decades. But we do need more structure. We do need, even a bilateral investment treaty between our two countries, which the United States has with 40, 50 other countries. We should have with India. We should be able to resolve investor state dispute settlement in an organized way that keeps us out of domestic court systems. We should have an agreement on Social Security taxes and what to do with those proceeds. We should have an agreement on the movement of people and skilled workers and unskilled workers, frankly, between our two countries. There are huge pockets. I'll give you one example of how much we missed. I gave you that number of just a few $1 billion in two-way trade. In 1985, the two-way trade number between the US and China was $7 billion. In 1985, the two-way trade number between the US and India was $5 billion. We are relatively equal. That number now with China is well over $700 billion between the US and China. And again, we're at $150 billion. So we missed out on years and years of economic growth between our two countries, but all the signs are positive. We do need more of a structured agreement. I know there have been talks of even a free trade agreement. I think we should look at all the options, but we need something in place to take us to that next level, to address some of the issues. I guess the final thing I would say is that 150 billion doesn't also measure a lot of the other investments taking place in our two countries. It doesn't measure how much US industry relies on Indian IT companies, for example, or Indian healthcare companies. We don't measure that as a form of bilateral trade. So the commercial linkages are actually far deeper than just looking at that $150 billion. So I think we have to look at all those numbers, look at the number of visas issued, look at the number of students that are here from India in the United States, and figure out how to grow all those different categories in addition to just thinking about bilateral trade.
You had touched upon healthcare sector. So from Indian businesses perspective, based on your experience and the time that you have spent in India and in the US, both on the policy making as well as the bilateral trade side, which are the key sectors which the Indian businesses should look forward to over the next 12 to 24 months in terms of a clear business opportunity to provide goods or services on the US market?
Yeah, I think it's unlimited. Obviously, dealing with this crisis, right? So, and our healthcare sectors are already very intertwined, and I think this has been actually a very positive development.
Right.
And we've had some bumps along the way, right? We had some bumps on intellectual property protection. We've had bumps on pricing. We have different healthcare models, and that's going to be understandable. So I think those conversations need to continue. But obviously, drug discovery, innovative therapies, medical device collaboration, I think is going to be exceptionally important. And I think we have a great foundation upon which to build. And so I think that's a very, very promising area. And again, not just production, but also research and innovation to combat the next pandemic. And gosh, outside of healthcare, there really is so much. When I look at, again, this recent stimulus, I look at what's happening in education and social services, homeland and national defense, biomedical countermeasures, transportation. I mean, there's really, for Indian companies looking for investment opportunities in the United States, I think you're going to have, again, hopefully a very robust economy by the end of the year, and very critical needs left unaddressed. And I think Indian companies have been coming here in large numbers, and this nature of bilateral two-way trade is really important. So as much as we want to push U.S. companies into India, I think it's important for Indian companies to be here, creating jobs, investing in local communities. That's frankly the best way to solve some of the underlying challenges that we have on immigration, on some of the sectors that are more sensitive. The more we're linked commercially like that, the easier it will be to solve some of our policy differences.
So a couple of points that I would like your views on. In terms of foreign direct investment, do you think it will continue to flow in? What about the private equity investments, especially that now we'll see a lot of stressed out assets, and you touched about the insolvency regulations, which have been a little bit rationalized right now. So in general, how do you see the investment environment in India building up vis-a-vis foreign companies, foreign investors, whether it is sovereign funds or private equity in general? Your views on that?
So because as you, taking a cue from what you said, Standard & Poor's has revised India's GDP growth estimate to 3.5 for next financial year, down from 5.2. There is going to be a short-term hit in consumption. It will take some time for the supply chain to revive. I mean, the cycle has to turn. Wage loss leads to consumption going down, which reduces the growth. I think some of those things will take a quarter or two to reset. There will be some sectors which will get adversely impacted: hospitality, aviation, travel, real estate, some manufacturing sectors dependent on international supply chain. However, India continues to give a great opportunity for consumption-led sectors such as FMCG, healthcare, financial services. Hygiene is a new sector, subsector, which is emerged in a big way, and also from a US context that Ambassador Verma spoke about. Pharmaceuticals, telecom, IT. I think just in terms of data points, with the correction in the capital markets and by close to 35-40%, and dollar moving up by almost 7-8% in the last 1 month, India is arithmetically significantly cheaper to global capital. That is your investment in capital markets, the FIIs. US is the owner of, I would say, more than half of global capital that drives growth in various economies. If I look at India, I think it is a very important source of capital. One of our publications, which is called the Deal Tracker, which is a repository of all deal-related information, 2019 calendar year saw a 44% decline over 2018. About 1,200 deals happened, amounting to about $61 billion. And these are data points around FDI. It ignores what goes through capital markets. This is really due to what I would call the global uncertainty and the headwinds that the world was facing. Primary reason for this decline was that the M&A activity in India was lower. There were only 4 $1 billion plus deals as opposed to 16 in calendar year 18. Now that's where the US-India corridor is extremely important. If I remind all of us that in calendar year 18, there was a big direct investment by Walmart into Flipkart that actually made the investment from the US-based or US domiciled corporations at an all-time high. US is still only about 8% of overall FDI in India. So it's a healthy number, but it's not disproportionate. Rather, it is underweight in my view. I think in terms of private equity, it was a golden year for India. The year-on-year growth on private equity was 63% increase over previous year, 800 odd deals amounting to about close to $34 billion. There were about 5 $1 billion deals as well as 67 deals of more than $100 million. These are significant checks that were written by global private equity. I think it was also a watershed year in terms of record year for growth funding of mature Indian companies. That goes on to show that there is a lot of faith in long-term prospects that India has for global capital. In terms of sectors, again, broad-based manufacturing, energy, pharma, infrastructure, banking, telecom, 66% of the FDI into the country fell in these sectors. Tech and IT continues to be important, smaller deal sizes, but about 63% of the volume of deals was just in tech and telecom sectors. Overall, I think the environment continues to be robust. India being an attractive destination for global capital, given the big demographic advantage, the huge markets for consumption, as well as a labor force which can get trained to become effective supply chain for supplying countries such as US. I think I'm going to just spend another minute around another very specific asset class, which is distressed assets or insolvencies. The pandemic is actually going to lead to some of the insolvencies getting expedited. A lot of new businesses will get into stress. I think there's an opportunity for global distressed capital to look at India a little more keenly. I think we had, in our experience, talked to about 60 odd funds based in the US. There was a lot of interest. They're sitting on billions and billions of dry powder, but I think they were slow to take steps. I think this creates another opportunity for them to look at deals. Lenders are going to be more amenable to doing deals. Restructuring and pre-packs, working promoters, going to be is going to be easier. I think deals are going to become more attractive, better priced. I would say a lot of the stakeholders will fall in line to make deals happen. We are also hoping that there will be some regulation changes that will also help drive this up. For example, in aviation, one of the key reasons the interest in one of the largest insolvencies that happened in India for Jet Airways, it was a little bit of a dampener because FDI in aviation is limited to 49%. So government is looking at how to further enhance the attractiveness of this segment within the investor scenario, or sorry, the kind of investors who look at distress deals. I'm sure they will be more amenable to helping this capital flow into the country.
Ambassador Verma, what we are hearing these days is that there's a boardroom level discussion going on that let's diversify and not put our entire capacity, especially in terms of manufacturing, only in one jurisdiction. And there are talks that we are hearing that probably now the global companies, especially US companies, are looking at in terms of alternate spaces as well. In fact, recently there were media reports which suggested that 200 large corporations are looking at manufacturing base in India as well. So keeping in view the present pandemic, wherein the manufacturing as well as supply chain has got impacted, and probably there will be new political equations also which will develop over a period of time because of the stress and the strain developed because of the present situation. Sir, do you think if these discussions actually see the light of the day, wherein people are looking at alternatives at the top level, where does India stand, and can India fill in that void? And I'm borrowing what Prime Minister Modi once said, make in India for the rest of the world. Can India actually fill in that void in terms of manufacturing as well and support US companies in having a bigger base in India?
Short answer is absolutely. And we've seen this. I don't think this is just kind of an idea. It's actually something that's already happened. We've been talking about diversifying our supply chain, away from China, being so heavily weighted in China for a long time. And, when I served in India, the number of manufacturing openings that I went to for US companies, big US companies, it seemed to happen every month. There was a brand new opening somewhere in India of a US, not just even a data processing center, but actual manufacturing. And I think that's such a good development. I think it does need to happen again, that needs to be bilateral in nature. I think we have to be sensitive of the kind of political dynamics in the United States as well, and concern about offshoring or outsourcing or the export of US manufacturing jobs. So I think we're going to have to show the budgets, and I think we can do. I think on the prior comments, I think that American equity in particular is very excited about India, and not just the private equity, but broader than that. I think we look out at India just 10 years from now, we'll lead the world in almost every category. Largest middle class, most college graduates, third largest economy, third largest military, largest democracy, obviously, incredible spend on infrastructure. So I think we want to be a part of this story. And I would just draw upon, Prime Minister Modi's comments about the United States and India being natural allies, President Obama's comments about this being the defining partnership of the century, and a quote that I first heard from then Senator Biden when I worked with him in the Senate over a decade ago, where he said that if in 2020 the US and India are the closest of friends and partners, then the world will be a safer and more prosperous place.
Sid, one quick question before I ask the final question to the ambassador in the interest of the time. In the next 2 to 4 quarters, which are going to be quite stressful for the Indian businesses, what will be the key recommendations in terms of the Indian promoter-driven businesses to stay put?
I think go back to basics, conserve cash, focus on reducing costs, make sure you look at your expansion a little more with abundant caution, try and protect as many jobs as possible, because that's what eventually leads to consumption, and look at more strategic alignment with countries, just to take, again, repeat what Ambassador Verma talked about. There's an opportunity for businesses to strategically align between India and US. I think that's where the real strategic partnership will get strengthened. I think forging that is important, focusing on industries such as pharma, hygiene, agri-produce, becoming a key supply chain partner to global trade. I think those are some of the things that Indian businesses should start looking at.
Rightly said, Sid. The world produces for US to consume. US consumes about 25% of the global consumption. So, Ambassador Verma, a quick question for you, sir, and it's slightly tricky in terms of the visa policies. Indian IT industry has been instrumental in success of the US tech sector. Similarly, US tech sector has provided a lot of impetus to the Indian IT industry. I think over the last few years, there has been a lot of issues, debates, discussions on the visa policies. Do you think it's a time for the governments to relook at those policies, join hands together, and see a very strengthened partnership? As you mentioned, 2020 partnership could be stronger. If not in 2020, maybe 2025, it should be one of the strongest partnerships with both the economies gaining from it. your final take on that?
Yeah, look, it's an important area. Yeah, immigration and the movement of people in both directions between our two countries is critical. You can't have these kind of commercial linkages without people being able to move somewhat freely. You know, when I think about the numbers just on visas, for example, this number may be a year or so dated, but you know, we were issuing 1 million visas a year to Indian nationals to come to the United States. And that was in every category. That was for students, that was for tourist purposes, for commercial purposes. The number of H-1B, or the kind of what's considered classic kind of IT company visa, the H-1B visa, of that million was about 65,000. So I think we also have to keep in perspective that the vast majority of people traveling between the two countries are not coming on a H-1B visa. That's the first point I'd make. Second, you know, I do think the Indian IT companies are now very much have become, in many ways, American companies. When you go around the United States and you see some of the big, signs that are up in tech parks or in major industrial centers, you see the names of Indian companies, and they are hiring American workers. And that's the way, I think, to get past some of these sensitive political challenges. And there were problems in the past. There were problems of temporary workers coming to the United States, recommending certain contraction in US operations and sending that work back to India. Now that's just politically challenging in any country, let alone the United States, which really tries to protect its local workers. And so I think a lot of those practices have changed. Final thing I'd say, until we have kind of a comprehensive immigration reform in the United States, a lot of these questions will continue to get kicked down the road even further about caps on H-1B, what our particular kind of posture is with regard to other countries in this sector. But we need to fix this system in the United States, which we haven't done in decades. And until that time, I think this will continue to be a bit of a rough area, but I also think we've gotten past a lot of our most challenging times in this subject.
Thank you, sir. I'm reminded of another popular quote which reads like that a bend in the road does not mean the end of the road unless you fail to take the turn. I think the current pandemic situation is clearly a big challenge for the governments, for the businesses. However, this too shall pass. In the Indian context, I think with the support from the government and the regulators and the resilience of the Indian entrepreneurs, I'm sure Indian businesses will emerge stronger. And as we heard from Ambassador Verma, as well as said, that there are huge opportunities in the US-India corridor, where the governments of both the countries are very supportive. Therefore, we need to identify the opportunities and put our heads and hearts together from both the sides to make sure that there is a silver lining amidst the dark clouds. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us today on the panel.